Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar with Dr. Noah Izzat on Relational Leadership. My name is Rob McLaughlin. I'm the Associate Alumni Director here at Northwood University. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that if you have any questions during today's webinar, please use the Q&A feature. We will get to them at the end to address those questions. Now let me introduce our speaker. Dr. Noah Izzat is a leadership psychologist with over 20 years experience specializing in building productive group dialogue. His career has been dedicated to understanding how groups of people work together to establish productive leadership dialogue to achieve extraordinary results, whether in a small nonprofit or a Fortune 500 company. Dr. Izzat is the assistant professor at Northwood University DeVos Graduate School, where he also serves as division chair for the MSRH and MSOL programs. Additionally, he contributes to several dissertation committees and teaches in the DeVos doctoral program. We are particularly proud to note that Dr. Izzat is a Northwood alumnus, earning his MBA from the DeVos Graduate School. He also holds a bachelor's degree from Michigan State University and a doctorate in philosophy and organizational leadership from the Chicago Zoo. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Noah Izzat.
Thanks, Robin. Appreciate that very much. It's never a shortage of embarrassment to hear like a large announcement on who you are. So I appreciate you reading that. Thank you so much for that. Welcome everybody to our September event here for the Alumni Association. So let's get into it. Let's talk about relational leadership, building productive group dialogue. Really happy to be here. For those of you who are on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect with you. For those of you who like YouTube, I'm on YouTube. I'd love to connect with you there as well. Before we start today, I do have a question for you, and you can use the Q&A feature for this right now. So what is one thing you wish would change about the dialogue on your team? When you think about the way that your team interacts with each other and the way what you talk about, where you talk about it, whether it's online or in person or a hybrid situation, what do you think, what is one thing you wish would change about the dialogue on your team? So you can drop that answer in the chat area or use the Q&A feature, as Robin said. And while you're thinking about that right now, I just got to plug the bookstore. They just got this new Nike apparel. I'm wearing it right now. Robin is going to put a link in the chat area where you can get yours. Come on now, fall's coming up. We got to look nice. Got to feel comfy. So this is so comfy. You got to get this. Come on now. Go ahead and get your Northwood sweatshirt, get your Northwood hoodie on. So, all right. So what is one thing you wish that you would change about the dialogue in your team? So while you're thinking about that and dropping that in the chat area, we're going to jump right into it. So the research that I did at the Chicago School for my PhD, really, I was kind of navigating, much like any doctoral student, trying to figure out what would my study be about. And so I went in thinking that I was going to study organizational leaders. And so I started looking for research just on that. So this is Dr. Henry Mintzberg and Dr. Joseph Lampel. One of their studies was one of the first things that I read, and it had to do with 19 corporate chief executive superstars that went to a very popular MBA program. And out of those 19, 10 tanked. They were outright failures. They bankrupted the company. They stole money from the company. They got fired. I mean, it was just a disaster. And so 4 of those had questionable records at best. So not really great efforts and not great outcomes. And only 5 of them seemed to do pretty well. And so I was shocked by this because I was thinking like, okay, organizational leaders, I'm going to study the best and brightest. And here we are looking at, these up and comers out of this very popular, East Coast elite school, and not really great results. And it's like, what happened there? At the same time, I was working in the corporate space and human resources. And so I had access to all the great resources that you would see from the Society of Human Resources Management. And what I found here was that, individual contributors were less likely than executives to be very satisfied with the level of respect shown to all employees. And we've known about engagement issues in the workplace, and that's something that every organization is seeking to improve upon. But to see this stat and to see the previous study, I was a little shocked about like, why have things not improved? And to add, to make matters worse, I mean, I was studying things like learned helplessness and how that impacts dialogue in the workplace, and how, we as direct reports will kind of advocate personal responsibility to our leader because, why should I bother? Nothing's going to change. And You kind of learn to kind of give up over the course of time because you maybe put your recommendation in the hat and then it got kicked back to you and you were told no too many times, or I'm not going to open my mouth because I just want to keep my job, which is a feeling that I know we all have had. So I was really shocked and struggling with like where to position all of this learning that I had at the Chicago school, and with whether it was these theories or these stats or much more. And so I had the privilege of working with Dr. Dan Dayton, who was on my committee for my dissertation. And no, he is not Dr. Thomas's cool younger brother. Dr. Thomas is our academic dean, for those of you who don't know, who looks pretty similar. Dr. Dan Dayton is like a hero of mine. When I went to him and vented to him about this frustration I was having about where do I navigate this issue that I'm seeing, how do I position it? He told me about an awesome theory called relational leadership theory. He introduced me to Dr. Mariel Bean. She's an expert on relational leadership theory. She's also an expert on complexity leadership theory. Both study the social space of leadership, which takes the emphasis off the individual and places it full on the situation. So when you see that definition on the screen there about relational leadership, it enhances our understanding of relational dynamics. So we're looking at social process and we're looking at organizing as the main things that comprise leadership that make it possible. She's out of, at the time she was at the University of Nebraska. Now she's at Texas Christian University doing great things there. So I needed to change up my worldview a little bit in terms of studying organizational leaders. I needed to look at leadership as something different. And here I finally settled on is a process of organizing. Like, how does leadership actually become real in the social space? And what does that look like? And so I'm going to warn you right now, there's an academic lecture imminent here. So buckle up. We're going to throw some terms at you, but I promise you when we get to the end of this that we're going to have a nice conversation about some of the ideas that you have in the chat area. So again, start thinking about, what do you wish that would change in the dialogue that you have with your coworkers and with your leaders. So let's get into it. My dissertation chair was Dr. Martin Leahy. He is an awesome human being. I owe him so much. I took relational leadership to him and started talking with him a little bit more directly about what could I do with this. And he directed me to Dr. Adele Clark, who is an expert in situational analysis, specifically with grounded theory research, which is a qualitative approach. And so she encourages researchers through her work to embrace the social space. And you can see in a quote from her 2005 work that the conditional elements of the situation need to be specified in the analysis of the situation because they are it. So instead of looking at behaviors, which I was used to, and there's nothing wrong with studying behaviors, there's a lot to be gained from that. But I was struggling to figure out, like, if we have leaders who are behaving badly, not all of them, but we do have some notable ones that we have to watch out for from time to time in the data, then suddenly I need to look at something like what's going on in the situation that's either causing these bad behaviors or just causing confusion across the board. She was telling me you need to embrace the actual situation and the elements of those situations. And so that opened up a whole world for me in terms of terms that I could start to use now that are not just people-oriented, even though they're still important. You can see that on the screen. We're still talking about people and their behaviors. We're talking about the space in which they operate. I know this resonates with you because we all went through the pandemic. Some of us had to switch to the online space. That did something to our dialogue. It did something to our time. It did something to our money in some cases, or the resources we had or didn't have. We had to change our history of work, which ultimately impacted our culture. And there were pockets of silence. You know this because you've got people who turn their camera off during a meeting and you're like, what is going on with them? I can't see them. You can't access them in that space. And so suddenly now these situational elements were just rich dialogue for us to figure out, like, what is going on here in the social space and how does that equal leadership occurring? This idea of how do we make productive decisions? How do we net success in our interactions with one another? And so that led me to find Dr. Wilfred Drath. He is out of the Center for Creative Leadership, which does great content. Highly recommend you check them out. But he wrote an excellent book called Deep Blue Sea, Rethinking the Source of Leadership. It is hands down one of my favorite books. He talked about this principle called relational dialogic principle. And that's when everything started to come together for this study, which was to find out, what is relational dialogic principle? It's people sharing work, create leadership by people sharing work, create leadership by constructing the meaning of direction, commitment, and adaptive challenge. That direction, commitment, and adaptive challenge, that piece, those three things, he refers to them as leadership tasks. Very interesting. Like, I have tasks that I have to do now to advance this dialogue. And it was really fun to see that play out in the social space. So we're going to talk about that. So suddenly now I had my framework, right? I had relational, let's get the laser pointer, professor. Here we go. I had relational leadership, which is a social process over the hierarchical role. That's just the focus of the study. Situation or situatedness, which is the situation as the unit of analysis over the individual knows best. So instead of interviewing individuals, let's look at a situation instead. And then dialogue. How do we construct the meaning of success? Like this idea of successfully completed work, as opposed to somebody imposing that meaning from their role. How do we understand how that comes to be? And so, not to appease the academic gods, here is the research question that came to be. I'll just point you to some aspects of it. How do situational elements relate in leadership being constructed in the talk among individuals completing work? Very simple. All those other things are just me showing off. So I just wanted to share with you, again, we're focusing on situational elements. How do they relate in the talk that we produce with each other? Because when you say things, you're referencing things in the social space. We got to pick up on what those things are to be able to understand how that sets the direction for what it is that we do to be able to net success. Before I could do that, though, one of my favorite people on this planet is Dr. Julie Benish. She's a great author, and also she was on my committee as well at the Chicago School. And she was also the department chair, is the department chair of organizational leadership at the Chicago School. She told me, hey, Noah, it's not so fast. You've got to do one more thing before you can continue down this path. And that was, we have to add some context to this as well. And so she recommended to me, and this is a weird thing for me to have to admit, which is Dr. Pepper's work, World Hypothesis. This book was produced during World War II. So the language is a little different than it is today. And so I had to really focus on this and put it into the framework. And so it took a while, but I'm going to show you this because it's kind of important. It's not enough to know, looking at leadership as a process. It's not enough for us to know these different situational elements and understanding how does dialogue come to be. We need to dive just a little bit deeper. And so this is what it looks like. It looks a little scary. It's totally easy. I'll show it to you right now. I'll walk you through it. Right here with my laser pointers at change. Anything that happens to you in the workplace, it's either a change of something that was, or it's something that's brand new. It's one of those two things. Either it's a change in something that was, or it's something that's brand new that we've never done before. And so that's what we look at. It's like, is this something new, or is this something that's different, that's going to change? The other piece is the quality aspect of this. Quality being spread. The spread of decision inputs that we have. If you hear in meetings, people are throwing all sorts of ideas in. How do those ideas evolve in our dialogue to add to the quality of it? And then you've got fusion. How do they fuse or connect to each other so that way we know we're about to make a successful decision, or at least complete the act of making a decision? And then texture, it's just the details. That's all it is. So are you looking at the different strands of dialogue that are produced? You got that coworker that starts talking, and then another coworker jumps in and joins them, and another coworker who disagrees with them, and then suddenly we've got this going on, and then we got a new topic that comes up. Maybe it's the coworker that's bringing us back to the past. Who knows? And then context. What's going on around us as we're making those decisions? And so references, easy. Everything that comes out of your mouth. What are you referencing in the conversation? Linear is my favorite one. This is that coworker who loves their idea so much and they can't let it go. They just keep bringing it up over and over and over again. I've even been that person, so I'll fall on my own sword. Convergent. When you see two coworkers connect on an idea and you're like, oh, suddenly they're syncing up and you can see something starting to happen, which is a wonderful thing for managers to see. Blocked, when somebody says nope, and there could be good blocking and bad blocking, so we just have to keep that in mind. And then there's those instrumental acts that happen where we either get a resource out of nowhere that helps us, or somebody says something that shifts the dialogue to where it needs to be. A lot of our graduate students experience this at the DeVos Graduate School, where somebody will say something and it just shifts the dialogue into a completely more productive place to be. And those are always fun moments to have, or maybe a couple of students come together and figure that out and talk. So we needed these things to be able to code what good productive dialogue looks like. And so I'm going to pause here because that was a bunch of terminology, right? I'm going to pause here to remind you that we have a question on the board, what is one thing that you wish would change about the dialogue on your team? So I'm going to pause here for a moment as you position all that information I just threw at you. And as you start to post ideas in there into the chat before I continue my little lecture. And also just remind you that, hey, we got the auto show coming up. So Robin's going to post in the chat area a little link to the auto show with some information about that. It's coming up here in a couple of weeks. We'd love to see you on campus. Homecoming, come on back, folks. Be nice to see your beautiful faces there in the environment. So on campus in the university here, our beautiful university. All right, so reminder, yeah, what is one thing you wish would change about the dialogue on your team? So go ahead and drop that in the chat area. So how do we study this? Created a game. Real simple, right? You can't get more social than a game. So I had a game designer friend of mine that I work with and still work with to this day. And so we created an activity for 6 participants. They had 30 minutes to get to an end space. They had to work together and try to collect as many tokens as possible before time expired. And they had 30 minutes to do it. And so we had 3 groups play this activity. Just to be able to see how those dialogue patterns related to each other and how they compare to each other. And I'm happy to say that this is an activity that we actually use in the program to this day at the DeVos Graduate School. And these are some of the fun folks that have had a chance to complete that activity. And I also think we should welcome them as well with a little round of applause, maybe, because these are some of our newest alumni. So yeah, it was really fun to work with our accelerated MBAs and our full-time MBA students. And as you can see, they're all smiling, so they're not sad having gone through this activity, so we didn't torture them too much. So, but I do want to pause here real quick before continuing, just to call out one thing, and that many of these students that you see on the screen are student athletes. And so it's really important for us to support them in their efforts. And so Robin's going to post in the chat area a link to our giving site for athletics. So whatever sport you love, whether it's football or tennis or track or cross country or soccer, softball, I know our women's softball team did really well last year. So did our girls basketball team. My wife and I support the girls basketball team. And I shout out to Maddie Volker. Just want to say hi to her real quick. But yeah, like, this is an awesome opportunity for you to give. So whether it's $10, $20, $30, just give, help them out. They work really hard and they deserve it for sure. So thanks for helping them out. Appreciate you. All right. So we mapped every minute of every dialogue that occurred in that game. So that's 30 minutes. So do the math, right? So it was a lot of maps. In fact, we had multiple maps in some cases because the dialogue got a little complex. So I had well over 120 maps among the 3 participant groups that went through the study. And so we would connect the dialogue. We would code for whether there were convergent moments or blocking moments, or if there was an instrumental moment and things like that took place. And so you can see that it got a little messy, but the good news is with some of the qualitative software that we have, I was able to distill a lot of this down into 3 sensitizing concepts. And that's what you do with situational analysis. You want to just get the sensitizing concept, like get a sense of like what it is that's happening here in the dialogue. And the first one was, and you can see here, just to be thorough, quality spread, quality change, quality fusion. We want to know what was the quality of the dialogue now that we've coded it using those contextual terms, those references and blocking and things like that. And so practice was one of the main concepts that came out. For those groups that just simply did a practice round, let's just experiment, let's just see what happens. A lot came from that was that kind of alleviated some of those behavioral, boring complexities that we kind of carry with us into the dialogue. So you think about your work style or your emotional intelligence, things like that. Just by practicing, it kind of let people let their guard down, and the dialogue became a little bit more open. And some of those elements started to show up on this, in the coding a lot more freely than opposed to those groups that didn't practice, and then they found themselves kind of stuck. Checking halfway through the activity was a big thing. Checking in just to make sure everybody understands where we're at. For those groups that got into good practice, they found themselves getting into that flow state that you hear everybody talking about online right now. And so checking in just to make sure and being honest about that was a huge, obviously, behavior piece, but just the practice of checking allowed people the chance to be honest, and avoid those dangers of groupthink. Define was a big one. If we've made a decision, we've checked, we know that we're not going back, and you would see people revert back to their previous tendency, even though we've already covered this. But because they define things, the successful groups that completed the activity, they were able to say very quickly, no, we've already addressed that. And there was that little history note that showed up, and they were able to move on and not delay any further. And so some of those definitions, right, capture the standard, so to speak, kind of helps set the dialogue up for success even more. Significance, real quick, we're going to leave it open for questions. Organizations need to, from a professional practice standpoint, organizations need to seek, leadership topics that fit with where we're headed throughout the year. So if you think about it very simply, like, what's your marketing plan for your leadership dialogue? You have a marketing plan for your product. You should probably have one that mirrors what's happening internally as well. Building that process of organizing helps employees at all levels, up, down, and across, understand like what is going on in a productive way. Future research just needs to continue to chase the social space. Of course, I'm going to say that because I studied it, but gamified approaches can really help grounded theory. It helps us kind of reimagine what grounded theory looks like beyond traditional interviews. And then experiential learning activities and cooperative decision-making games and activities can be used to teach, whether it's in the corporate space or here at the grad school or in the undergraduate programs. Good thing about Northwood is that we're no strangers to that, which is really why I love teaching here. It really gives our students, particularly our younger students, a chance to experience what the social space looks like so that they don't have to guess when they get to the corporate environment. So you can screenshot this right now after all of them show up. You can audit your leadership dialogue, and I'll get a screenshot over to Robin, and she can send it along with a note to you all and a link to the recording to this call. But you can start to audit your leadership dialogue pretty quickly just by asking some simple questions. I'll give you a couple of them. I'm not going to read all of them, but the first one is silence. Do we need to leverage silence in this decision making? Have we been moving too quickly? Or do we need to unearth it somewhere? Whether it's a pocket of the organization that needs to weigh in, or maybe it's just a person in the room that just hasn't had a chance to speak up yet. Space, what can we do to improve the space of this dialogue and where it's occurring? How can we create the physical space needed for people? And so there's good questions here for you to be able to kind of address what's happening in your social space of your dialogue. I do have a coach, executive I'm coaching right now. She is actively trying to undo the unproductive historical pattern of the dialogue. So she's talking about history and how we need to revere it, but at the same time, we need to move on from it. How do you respect the past? So there's a lot of cool things that can come from that. So yeah, screenshot of that, do a little quick audit, talk about it with your teams. Always a great discussion. So what is one thing you wish you would change about your dialogue in your team? So I'm going to stop talking. We got about 7 minutes or so. We can stay after a little bit if we need to. Robin, what do you think? What do you got in the chat area?
Thanks, thanks, Noah. Anyone who has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll get to those. We had someone put a thing in the Q&A, I think was wanting to answer one of your chat things, but don't be afraid to bring up difficult topics or things that may be disruptive.
I see that there was more collaboration for brainstorming solutions when an individual has a problem. Hey, Sarah, what's up? If we're back to that comment about what's your marketing plan for your process throughout the year, I mean, we set goals, right? So where is the space to collaborate to get to those goals or to brainstorm around those goals? And if we don't have those anchored throughout the year, we're kind of left guessing, where are we at? And a lot of us go back to the learn helplessness thing, which is like our easy default button to say, well, I'm just going to wait for the leader to schedule that. Well, you can ask about it, and we have to ask about it, and we have to engage in it, or else we're going to miss those opportunities. So if you see that opportunity, say it. So, hey, Marissa Hernandez, what's going on, friend? Offering solutions to business problems instead of leaning on leaders to solve issues. Marissa, I feel like I want to get you off the microphone and into this one right now. Do you want to talk to me? Are you listening? You didn't send an AI bot to me, did you? Marissa, where are you at? There she goes. I'm here. All right, cool. Let's see here. So talk to me a little bit more about offering solutions to business problems instead of leaning on leaders to solve issues. She's going to chat. Robin, can we take her on? Can we invite her in? Dan?
I think maybe.
That'd be awesome again. We'll see. If we can, it's okay.
It is possible if she wants to.
Marissa, you want to join me real quick? Can you do it? Let's just try it.
I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I gotcha. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
I was kind of referencing kind of empowering your employees to come to you with decisions and recommendations for business problems instead of just relying on me or one of our leaders to make decisions.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, I love this comment. Thank you for that. Well, there you probably have a little bit of history of learned helplessness on the team where they don't feel comfortable coming to you because it hasn't been organized in our process for them to do that. And even if we do have it organized, we haven't put the right reinforcers in it throughout the year to say, hey, we truly mean that there's no dumb decision here, or no, there's no dumb recommendation. We want to know what it is that you have to say. I love the hyperbole around trust. It's pretty much everywhere. Everybody who does a TED Talk talks about it, it seems. And I don't want to be overtly negative there, but it's just, there's not a lot of practical decisions that are being offered to the social space. And so that's why I use the marketing analogy, because if you have a marketing plan for your product, you should probably have one for how it is that we get together and talk. And so that way people know that there's a theme to this discussion where we need to head. I see good football coaches do this very well. They've got resources, materials, and speakers, and all those things, all hitting this overarching theme about how it is that we're going to perform well on the field. We do that in the business world too. And businesses that do this and take the time to do this are the ones that are going to win this thing, because people feel a little bit more connected to the dialogue and they're not guessing anymore. So the point behind that. So Marissa, thank you for that. Any other questions? Any other ideas? Thanks for talking. Thanks, Marissa. I appreciate you. Well, Robin, do you got anything else you want to add? Anything that we should let our alumni know and our guests know before we head out?
Thank you so much, Noah, for today, and everyone for attending. As Noah said, next week is our auto show weekend. Tents are already going up on campus, so it's always fun time to be on campus for this. And so far, the weather looks great. So hopefully you will join us to kick off auto show weekend on Thursday. We have our Outstanding Alumni Awards, and we have 6 distinguished alumni that we will be honoring. On Friday, auto show officially kicks off. The show will be open, I believe, from 9 to 8 at night. I'll double check, but we'll send the auto show hours. So Friday we have auto show open. We host our auto show gala on Friday night over at the Midland Country Club. Saturday we have Tavern 59 during the football game, and also at the on the mall walk. We have alumni offers for you. You can park on campus. We have 2 collectible items you can get. They're limited edition. We have a mini Woody, and then we also have our collectible cars, and then we also have the Farewell Family Brunch on Sunday. So we hope that you guys can join us for Auto Show Weekend next week. And then also we'll have our next alumni webinar in October, and we hope you can join us for that.
Looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun.
Thanks everyone for joining today.
See you, everybody.